Hey everyone, a quick disclaimer before we begin. This review is going to be comparing Deus Ex The Fall to Deus Ex Human Revolution, as it is the most played Deus Ex game and makes a good reference point. I will not be talking about everything, just things that stood out to me. Also, I would like to mention the fact that I played the PC part of the game, so this review is based on that version. With that said, onto the video. Deus Ex Human Revolution is a critically renowned game in the Deus Ex franchise that was known for modernizing the original Deus Ex game without radically changing the feel and legacy of the original game too much. Considering the massive success of Deus Ex Human Revolution, Square Enix decided to give a piece of that excellent quality game for the mobile market titled Deus Ex The Fall, following the events before Deus Ex Human Revolution. So today, we are going to take a look at Deus Ex The Fall, what it took from the Deus Ex franchise, what it did with it, and what it gave in return. We will start by looking at the general issues plaguing the game, to the gameplay, then its story, and finally, the soundtracks. So without further ado, let's dive into The Fall. So let's talk about the elephant in the room. This game is a mobile game that was later ported into the PC, so things like graphics, gameplay mechanics, story, etc. is going to be affected to meet that platform standards. Things like textures being very low detailed, very few graphical fidelity options, poor animations during conversation, and broken gameplay mechanics plagued this game as a result. The best case example of this would be the humans in this game. The humans in this game look like lizard people or something straight out of the sewers. The other issue that I have with this game is how jarringly short this game is and how it is not complete. I will expand on this later, but this game was only about 4 to 5 hours long and was being released chapter-wise like a Telltale game. Personally, I'm not a fan of chapter-wise storytelling in games where there is a certain level of gameplay involved. For one, it is a blueprint for squeezing more money out of the consumer, and the other reason being that it can cause a large period of break in hours worth of gameplay loop and immersion. This could lead to wasted time in which players have to relearn the gameplay mechanics and story details which could otherwise have been used to introduce new and more interesting concepts and ideas. Now, this might be an issue to most, but for me this was a big plus, and that is the PC port itself. It seems from all the research I did for this video, people hate the PC port of this game because this was a port of a somewhat good mobile game. But I like the PC port mainly because I hate touch controls. They are clunky, and I'm pretty sure people would choose something else if an option like keyboard and mouse existed for smartphones. I'm someone who will actually skip any game title if it was released for smartphones, even if the title was from a beloved franchise. So, having a PC port for this game let me experience this game that might otherwise have just been overlooked by me. So now that we have got the general pros and cons out of the bag, let's talk about the things that actually matter, starting with the gameplay. Deus Ex The Fall is mainly dependent on the massive success of Human Revolution to its very core, including its gameplay. The gameplay here is a more streamlined and smartphone-friendly version of Human Revolution. So things like the inventory system is dumbed down version, where you can collect any item as much as you want, and things like stacking boxes to get our sections of a level is non-existent. The only good part of this is that you will feel at home here if you have played Human Revolution. Things like the stealth is the same, where you traverse an enemy hideout section from cover to cover and take them out one by one. There are also events and multiple ways to get through a level. But the same can't be said for combat though. The combat here is very jank. Personally, I'm someone who plays stealth primarily, and I only go combat if I mess up. So I only notice the janky combat once other people who have played this game mention it. Things like enemy hitbox clipping, weapon switching being jank, etc. was very prominent here. The other bad thing of this game being Human Revolution but smartphone is microtransaction and microtransaction influence in gameplay. This game has somewhat of an underdeveloped microtransaction system where you can buy items in game for real money. Now, the game was not completely influenced by the microtransaction system until the very last section where you have to take out a giant robot called a box bot. This robot was very spongy. I had to chuck out grenades after grenades at this thing. It ate up all the grenades and mines in my inventory, plus the one grenade that was lying around in the level. At the end, I had to purchase the grenades using the in-game currency, and it put a massive dent in the in-game wallet I had. For context, these box bots were in Human Revolution too, but they did not take up this much grenades to put down, nor, as far as I can remember, did you have to take one down to progress the story there. So if this game was to go on after chapter 1, I can definitely see the microtransaction influencing the game in more instances. Now, like any Deus Ex game, all is not bad here. This game was going to feature interesting areas like New York and Australia, which are something that I want to see in a Deus Ex game, especially considering the fact that the hubs featured here are really detailed and very awesome. You explore tropical area of Panama, Costa Rica in this game, which contrasts the urban areas like Hangsha and Detroit in Human Revolution. The locations you explore here are as expected from a game trying to mimic Human Revolution. The other thing that game mimics very well from Human Revolution is the atmosphere. I felt at home when I jumped into this game after the previous two Deus Ex titles that had very different atmospheres. That is not to say those games have terrible atmosphere, I like those atmospheres, but Human Revolution's atmosphere is just very immersive and different than any other game that I have experienced. So it was a joy to find that same atmosphere here, and in some instance, refresh it by bringing it into a tropical place. Deus Ex The Fall follows Ben Saxon, a mercenary and an ex-Tyrant member. The Tyrants are a mercenary group employed by Bell Tower who are sponsored by the Illuminati. The Tyrants are the group that makes favorable situations for the Illuminati in which they can gain power. When Ben was a member of the Tyrants, he ends up finding the truth about Tyrants through one such event and escapes the Tyrants. He is then rescued by an ex-federal agent, Anna Kelso. That is your basic premise. The story in this game is super short, like I mentioned before. I personally knew that this game was not complete and short, and I was prepared for it when I went into this game. But even then, I was shocked at how short it was. Now, I will admit, 4 to 5 hours is not that short for a game that is said to be short. But here, this game came off short because it only accomplished the plot setting in that 4 to 5 hours. The story cuts off right when we were gonna start seeing the meat and flesh of the story. Now, I did my research on this game, and it seems like they had chapter 2 completely planned out, and from what I saw, the story would have been another favorite in the franchise. The chapter did focus on confronting Ben Saxon with his personal issues and trying to solve an issue involving people he cared about. This story would have been another person story, like Human Revolution, where it would have introduced world conspiracy through that personal story. So that is more of a reason why it is such a shame this game was never completed. The other main gripe with this game is that it borrows a lot from Human Revolution, and that includes the main protagonist himself. Ben Saxon is introduced to us as another face of Adam Jensen from Human Revolution rather than a blank slate. Now, this in itself is not a problem because I personally believe that it is a great way to build up another character through a character that is already beloved. But the problem with this is that you have to put double the effort to differentiate Ben Saxon from Adam Jensen, as that character is already beloved and hard to separate for the player. And that exactly is the problem with Deus Ex The Fall. It failed to separate Ben Saxon from Adam Jensen and make him his own in Chapter 1 in itself. This in turn failed to capture audiences to stick around for the game. But I guess if I had to end this section in a more positive note, then the character interactions are somewhat on par with Human Revolution. It is not perfect, but it was one of the ways the game quickly sucked me into the story setting. Alright, talking about the soundtracks. The soundtracks were made by Michael McCain, the same person who composed the tracks for Human Revolution. So the tracks are pretty much the same compared to Human Revolution, where it is mostly ambience. And just like in Human Revolution, the soundtracks adds to the atmosphere very well. So you could take moments and just stand there in the city taking the atmosphere in. But as far as criticism is concerned, I have a major gripe with these type of soundtracks, and that is they don't stand out from each other and can seem like they are all the same. Comparing this to the first Deus Ex soundtracks, which have quickly become some of my all-time favorite soundtracks in a video game, there is not much to listen to here on their own. But this might just be a personal opinion at the end of the day. At the end of the day, Deus Ex The Fall is a very short Deus Ex experience, which borrows a lot from the success of Deus Ex Human Revolution, yet failed to give something on its own. Whatever it did with whatever it took from Human Revolution is very poor as a result. As far as recommendation is concerned, I won't recommend this game unless you have read the book Deus Ex Icarus Effect and want a sequel, or are pretty much desperate for a Deus Ex experience that you're willing to give $5 for an incomplete smartphone game. If I were to compare this to Deus Ex Invisible War on the basis of recommendation, I would put this under Invisible War because within the 10 hours or so that game lasted, it managed to get its flesh and meat out, while this game barely manages to set the story. So, in conclusion, Deus Ex The Fall is a short and bitter experience that expands to modern Deus Ex games that, if completed, could have been another favorite for many. But as it stands now, it can't be compared to any of the others and is ultimately a game that took way too much from the success of its predecessor and failing to give something on its own. Down.